My name is Claire Mercer. I'm 36. At Thanksgiving, when I was 10, my father pulled my dead mother's chair away from the table. He put Diane at the head, in front of my mother's china. Then he looked at me and said, "Call Diane, Mom, or eat in the garage." Diane served pie from my mother's dish and never looked up. I set my fork down. I asked for the garage key. But here's what my father didn't know. My mother's old Thanksgiving recipe box did not hold recipes anymore. That box is the reason I'm sitting here telling you this. If you believe a child should never have to buy a seat at the table by changing the word mom, stay with me and subscribe. Let me take you back to the last Thanksgiving my mother was still alive. The lake house was never quiet in November. My mother made sure of that. Her name was Helen Mercer. And every Thanksgiving, she turned that house into a place where even the shyest cousin knew where to sit. She wrote place cards by hand. She taped recipe cards to the cabinet doors. She let me stand beside her at the counter with a pencil behind my ear, like I was her assistant instead of a fourth grader with flour on my sleeves. My father, Robert, liked the house for different reasons. He liked telling people it was worth nearly $1.9 million. He liked saying the dock was original, the roof was new, and the view would only go up in value. My mother never talked about the house that way. To her, the house was not a number. It was a table. It was a chair saved for someone who was late. It was a card with your name on it. That last Thanksgiving with my mother began before sunrise. She was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, wearing her old blue sweater and the pearl earrings she only wore when company was coming. The house smelled like butter, onions, coffee, and the clove oranges she made me press with my thumbs the night before. She had 12 place cards spread across the counter. Mine sat beside hers. She tapped the card with one finger. "Kitchen shadow sits with the cook," she said. My father walked in while she was laughing. Robert Mercer never entered a room as if he belonged to it. He entered as if the room had been waiting to be inspected. He picked up my card, looked at the little turkey I had drawn in the corner, and set it down like it had crumbs on it. "She is 10, Helen," he said. "You don't have to make everything sentimental." My mother slid the card back into place. "I'm not making everything sentimental. I'm making sure she knows where she belongs." That was how our house worked then. My mother kept the memory. My father kept the keys. He did not yell often. That would have made him too easy to explain. He used smaller tools. He decided who sat where. He decided which stories were worth telling twice. He decided when my mother's traditions were charming and when they were childish. If he wanted to cut a person down, he did not swing. He moved a chair. By noon, the driveway had cars in it. My cousins came in with cold cheeks and grocery bags. My mother gave me 3 jobs. Fold napkins, keep the rolls covered, and read the name on each place card before setting it down. I took that job seriously. I put Aunt Linda near the window because she liked the lake. She used to tease my mother for rewriting names until every chair felt chosen. I put my grandfather far from the thermostat because he always touched it. I put my own card beside my mother's plate. My father watched me from the doorway. "Look at you," he said. "Assistant to the Queen." It sounded like a joke. It landed like a warning. After dinner, my mother took the recipe box down from the top shelf. It was cream-colored, with tiny painted strawberries on the lid, and a brass latch that never closed right. She opened it at the table and let me copy her cranberry relish card onto a new one. My handwriting leaned uphill. I spelled orange zest as 2 words that looked like they had never met. She did not correct it. She wrote one line at the bottom. "For Claire when she is ready." Then she tucked my bad little card behind hers. My father saw her do it. He shook his head. "You keep everything." My mother closed the box. "Only what matters." 3 months later, she was diagnosed. By spring, people had started lowering their voices when I walked into rooms. By summer, my father stopped asking what I wanted for dinner and started asking whether I had finished my homework. It was not cruelty yet. It was rehearsal. My mother got smaller that year, but she did not get vague. On one of her better mornings, she called me into the kitchen and asked me to bring her the recipe box. I carried it to her lap. She touched the lid before she opened it. "You know this is yours one day," she said. I thought she meant the recipes. I nodded because children nod when the truth is too big. She found a blank card and wrote my name on it. Claire Mercer. Then she paused and added 2 words under it. My daughter. The pencil made a dent in the paper because her hand was weaker than her will. Don't let anybody make you feel like a guest in your own life, she said. I did not understand that fully. I understood the word guest. I understood the way my father could make a room feel rented. Helen Mercer died in September. The funeral was full of women carrying casseroles and men standing with both hands in their pockets. My father accepted every hug like a man accepting deliveries. Diane came to the house 2 days later with a black cardigan, a covered dish, and a voice soft enough to pass for kindness. She was a friend from my father's office. That was how he introduced her then. Diane helped organize. That was her word. Not pack, not remove. Organize. She put my mother's aprons in a donation bag. She wrapped the china in newspaper, then asked my father whether he wanted to keep all of it. She stood in front of the pantry and said, "A fresh start might help Claire." No one asked Claire. I found the recipe box in a cardboard bin near the garage door. The bin had a strip of masking tape across one side. Donate. Diane had written the word in blue marker. My father was in the dining room telling someone the lake house would need serious maintenance soon, as if grief had already turned into a property report. I lifted the recipe box out with both hands. Diane saw me. "You can keep that dusty thing if you want." My father looked over. "Let her have it, it's kitchen clutter." Kitchen clutter. That was the first gift he gave me without meaning to. I carried the box upstairs and put it under my bed. I did not know what I had saved. I only knew my mother's handwriting was inside it, and no one in that house had asked whether I was ready to let it go. Thanksgiving came 8 weeks after the funeral. My father did not cancel it. He said routine would be good for me. What he meant was that routine would be good for him if he could put the right woman in the right chair and make the table obey. Diane arrived early. She wore my mother's apron, not one like it. Hers. The one with the small burn mark near the pocket from the year the gravy boiled over. I stared at that burn mark until she covered it with her hand. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked. I did not answer. My father heard the silence and corrected me with my full name. Claire. That was all he had to say. One word. One leash. Before dinner, he moved my mother's chair away from the table. It made a short sound against the floor. Diane sat down in its place and smoothed the napkin across her lap. My card was not beside her. It was at the far end, near the kitchen door. Then my father said the sentence I have already told you. "Call Diane Mom or eat in the garage." I looked at Diane. She did not look back. She picked up the pie server and cut into my mother's pumpkin pie recipe like she had earned the first slice. So I ate in the garage. There was no dramatic music in that moment. There was a card table with a wobbling leg. There was a paper plate. There was a space heater that clicked every few minutes but never warmed my feet. I ate one roll and half a spoonful of green beans. My tears stayed quiet. He did not get to use them. After everyone left, I went upstairs and pulled the recipe box from under my bed. I opened it on the floor. The cards smelled faintly like nutmeg and cardboard. I found the cranberry relish card my mother had let me copy. My crooked handwriting was still behind hers. "For Claire, when she is ready." That was the night I decided Diane would never get the word from me. The next years were not one long fight. They were smaller than that. Smaller can be worse. A large cruelty gives people something to point at. A small one becomes the weather. At Christmas, my father signed the cards from Robert, Diane, and Claire, with Diane's name where my mother's used to be. At my middle school concert, he introduced Diane to another parent and said, "This is Claire's mother now." At my 8th grade promotion, he leaned close before the photos and said, "Diane deserves the word." There it was. That became his phrase. Diane deserves the word. He used it when Diane cried because I called her by her name. He used it when he wanted my silence to look like healing. I learned not to give him a scene he could frame. I said, "She is Diane," and let the room do whatever it did after that. By high school, the lake house had become Robert's favorite subject. He talked about the new roof, the taxes, the dock, the value. Nearly $1.9 million by then, according to him. He said it in front of relatives. He said it in front of neighbors. He said it with the bright tone men use when they want credit for something they did not build. My mother's name got smaller in those conversations. First it was Helen's family place. Then it became the lake place. Then, by my senior year, it was my lake house. I noticed. I said nothing. The recipe box came with me when I left for college. My father carried 2 suitcases to the car and complained that I had packed too many books. Diane stood on the porch with sunglasses on her head. "You're taking that old box?" she asked. "Yes." She smiled, still holding on to dust. I buckled the box into the back seat beside my laundry bag. It looked silly there, strapped in like a passenger. I did it anyway. College gave me distance. Distance did not make Robert kinder, it made him more polished. He stopped ordering me to call Diane Mom. He started calling it healing. He said I was old enough to be generous. He said I was punishing a woman who had tried her best. Every time, the same phrase came back. Diane deserves the word. I got through graduations, birthdays, phone calls, and short visits by keeping my answers plain. I built a life that did not require his permission. I rented my own apartment. I learned which grocery stores marked down flowers on Fridays. I cooked my mother's cranberry relish badly 3 years in a row before I got it right. The recipe box stayed on my kitchen shelf after that. For years, I opened it only when November came close. I read my mother's cards. I followed her notes. I kept the box clean. I never checked the bottom, because I thought I already knew what she had left me. I was wrong. I found the bottom of the box by accident. I was 35 then, living in a small apartment with a kitchen so narrow I could touch the sink and the stove without moving my feet. It was the week before Thanksgiving. Rain had been hitting the windows all afternoon, and I had decided to make my mother's cranberry relish because I was tired of pretending I did not miss it. The recipe box sat on the counter with the lid open. I had taken out the cranberry card, the pie crust card, and the card where my mother had written gravy in large letters, and then underlined, "Do not rush this twice." I reached for my own crooked copy from when I was 10. It was still behind hers. When I slid it back, the stack caught on something. Not much, just a snag. I took the cards out in small groups and set them on a towel. At the bottom of the box was a piece of cream cardboard cut to fit the shape exactly. I had seen it for years. I had thought it was just lining. That day, one corner had lifted. I pulled it gently. The cardboard came up with a soft scrape. Under it was a flat envelope. My mother had written my name on the front. Claire. Not Claire Mercer. Not my daughter. Just Claire. In the handwriting I still knew faster than my own. I stood there with the envelope in my hand while the rain tapped the glass. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, because some things should not be opened while standing. Inside were 3 recipe cards, 1 old place card, and a folded copy of a letter. The recipe cards were not recipes, they were notes, written on the same little cards she used for food, because my mother trusted small, ordinary things more than grand gestures. One said, "For Claire, when the house gets loud." One said, "For Claire, if anyone tells her she does not belong." The last one said, "For Claire, because my daughter should never have to ask where to sit." I read that one twice. Then I put it down and covered my mouth with my hand. Grief rose up fast, but I kept my breathing small. Loud grief had always attracted people who wanted to manage it. The place card was the one from that last Thanksgiving. My mother had written my name in blue ink. Under it, in smaller letters, she had added one sentence. "Claire's seat stays at my table." The letter was from my mother to a lawyer named Marjorie Lane. It mentioned the lake house, Robert, lifetime use, and my name. It mentioned conditions. It mentioned the word daughter in a way that made my hands go cold. I understood enough to know it mattered. I did not understand enough to touch it alone. A younger version of me would have called my father that night. She would have wanted the fight. She would have wanted to hear him stammer. She would have wanted to say, "You threw me into the garage," and she still called me her daughter. But I was not 10 anymore. I had learned that if Robert could turn pain into noise, he could call the noise the problem. So I took pictures of every card. Then I put the originals back in the box. The next morning, I searched for Marjorie Lane. There were several Marjorie Lanes online. One sold handmade soap in Arizona. One was a retired school principal in Ohio. The one I needed was still practicing law 2 towns over from the lake house, in an office above a pharmacy. Her assistant answered the phone. When I said my name, the line changed. Not loudly, just a pause. Then the assistant said, "Miss Lane has been hoping you would call someday." That sentence did more to me than any threat my father ever made. Hope can be a heavy thing when you find out someone carried it without telling you. I drove there the following Friday. Marjorie Lane was in her 70s, with silver hair cut to her jaw and a desk that had no family photographs on it. She did not hug me. I liked her for that. She pointed to a chair, waited for me to sit, and asked if I had brought the box. I placed it on her desk. She did not open it right away. She rested her fingertips on the lid. Helen trusted objects, she said. She used to say people argue with memories, but they hesitate with handwriting. That sounded exactly like my mother. Practical, a little funny, and sharper than people noticed. Marjorie opened the box. She read the cards in silence. When she reached the place card, her mouth tightened. Not enough to be called emotion. Enough to be called recognition. Then she read the folded letter. "Did your father ever tell you your mother created a trust for the lake house?" she asked. "No." "Did he ever tell you he had the right to live there, but not the right to erase your place in it?" "No." "Has he asked you to sign anything?" "No." She looked at me over her glasses. "If he does, do not sign at a table." That was all she said at first. Not because there was nothing else. Because she knew the first rule of surviving a person like Robert. You do not hand him a map to the door you are guarding. Over the next hour, Marjorie explained only what I needed to know. The lake house was not simply my father's house. My mother's family had owned it before Robert ever learned which drawer held the corkscrew. Helen had arranged for him to live there under certain conditions after she died. She had not wanted to throw her grieving husband into the street. She had also not wanted her daughter turned into a visitor. Marjorie was not only my mother's old lawyer, she was the successor trustee Helen had named to step in if Robert tried to transfer, rent, rename, or treat the house as if Claire did not exist. In plain English, Robert could live there if he honored my mother's terms. He could not hand the house to Diane. He could not make me sign away my place at my mother's table. Both things could be true. That was my mother's handwriting all over it. Marjorie did not give me dramatic advice. She gave me a yellow legal pad and asked me to write down every time Robert had called the lake house his property in writing. Emails, texts, holiday invitations, anything with dates. I went home and did what she said. That became my work for the next month. I found an email from my father after a storm. My house took damage, he had written, but insurance should cover the dock. I found a text from Diane asking whether I wanted any of Helen's leftover kitchen things before she redid the pantry. I found a Christmas message where my father wrote, "Diane and I are making the lake house truly ours this year." Then I found the Thanksgiving invitation. It had arrived 2 days before I opened the false bottom. I had ignored it because ignoring Robert had become one of my quieter talents. Now I read it again. "Claire," it said, "this year should be different. Diane and I would like everyone at the lake house for Thanksgiving. It is time to put old pain behind us and recognize the family as it stands today. Marjorie may come by as well. There are a few family papers we should settle while everyone is together." Family papers. My father had always loved making a blade sound like a napkin. I sent the invitation to Marjorie. She called me 6 minutes later. "Did he use the phrase family papers?" she asked. "Yes." "And did he mention Diane?" "Twice." Marjorie was quiet long enough for me to hear traffic on her end of the line. "Bring the recipe box," she said. "That is it? Bring the box. Do not separate the cards from it. Do not give him copies. Do not warn him." I looked at the cream-colored lid on my table. The strawberries were chipped. The brass latch still did not close right. "Do you know what he is trying to do?" I asked. "I know what he may think he is trying to do," she said. "Those are not always the same thing." That was the first time the balance shifted. Not all the way. Not enough to make me safe, but enough for me to feel the floor under my feet. Robert called that Sunday. He did not begin with hello. He began with warmth. Warmth, from my father, was never a temperature. It was a tool. "Claire," he said, "I hope you are coming Thursday." I received the invitation. It would mean a lot to Diane. There it was again. Not to me, not to my mother, not even to him, to Diane. "She has carried a difficult position for years," he said. "You were a child, and children hold on to things. But you are a grown woman now." I let him finish. He took my silence for softness. He always had. "We are not asking for much," he said. "Just peace, a public peace, a few words, a signature. It is time Diane was acknowledged properly." "What words?" I asked. A small breath moved through the phone. I could hear how pleased he was that I had asked. "You know the word," he said. "Diane deserves the word." I wrote it down while he said it. Not because I needed to remember. because the act of writing kept my hands steady. He went on. He told me Diane had been patient. He told me Thanksgiving would be a beautiful time to heal. He told me Marjorie would be there, so everything could be handled cleanly. He told me I did not need to make it emotional. That last part almost made me laugh. Robert had dragged a dead woman's chair across a floor and called me emotional for hearing it. I will come, I said. His voice brightened. Good, that is very mature. I will bring something of Mom's. The brightness thinned. Claire. One word. Same leash. I waited. He corrected himself. Something of Helen's, you mean? No, I said. Something of Mom's. There was a silence. It was not victory. It was only a door refusing to open when he pushed it. I hope you will not make Diane uncomfortable, he said. I am bringing a recipe box. He exhaled. Relief came through the phone before he could hide it. That would be nice. Diane will appreciate the gesture. Of course she would. He thought I was bringing tribute. The next week, the messages started. Diane texted first. She used 3 heart emojis and said she was so moved that I was ready to honor her place in the family. She asked whether I could bring my mother's pumpkin pie recipe because she wanted to make it our tradition. I typed 3 different replies. I deleted all of them. Then I sent, I will bring the box. My father emailed the next morning. He attached a document with a name so harmless it almost deserved applause. Family Harmony Acknowledgement. The words were clean, the purpose was not. It described Diane as the maternal head of the household. It described the lake house as the marital home of Robert and Diane Mercer. It asked me to release any objection to their future plans for the house. In plain English, he wanted me to sign myself out of my mother's house. I forwarded it to Marjorie. She replied with one line. Bring the printed copy he sent you. That was all. No outrage, no exclamation marks, no speech about justice. Just a woman who had seen enough family paperwork to know a trap when it wore perfume. On Wednesday night, I packed the recipe box into a canvas tote and wrapped it in a dish towel. I placed the printed document beside it, then I added the Thanksgiving card my mother had written for me. I kept that one in a plain envelope, not because I was hiding it, but because some things deserve to arrive covered. Before I went to bed, I stood in my kitchen and read my mother's place card one more time. Claire's seat stays at my table. For 25 years, my father had believed the smallest things in that house belonged to the women and children. Cards, recipes, aprons, names. He never noticed that small things fit in a box. He never wondered what else they could carry. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove to the lake house with the recipe box on the passenger seat. I did not put it in the trunk. I wanted it where I could see it. The cream lid was wrapped in a dish towel, and the brass latch clicked every time my tires hit a seam in the road. It sounded like a small, stubborn mouth refusing to stay shut. The house appeared after the last bend, white siding, dark shutters, gray lake behind it. For a second, I saw it the way I had seen it at 10. Then I saw the new sign by the driveway. Robert, Diane Mercer. Diane had chosen script letters. Of course she had. My mother's family house had been given a wedding invitation font. I parked behind 2 rental SUVs and counted before I got out. 7 cars. 18 people. If everyone from the group text had come. Robert had not invited a family. He had built an audience. The front door opened before I reached the porch. Diane stood there in a cream sweater, with a dish towel folded over one shoulder like she had been born in that kitchen. Claire, she said, and both arms came out. I held the tote in front of me, not like a shield, like a fact. She noticed it. Her smile warmed by 1 degree. You brought it. I did. That means a lot. She touched the edge of the towel around the box. I moved the tote to my other hand. Her fingers closed on air. My father came up behind her. Robert was wearing a navy sweater, and the careful face he used around guests. It was softer than his real one. Softer faces can do more damage, because people mistake them for proof. Claire, he said, I'm glad you came. Marjorie Lane was already inside. That told me more than his greeting did. She sat in the living room near the window, a cup of coffee untouched on the table beside her. She looked like any older woman invited for a holiday meal, except her purse was closed on her lap with both hands resting over it. She gave me one nod. Not comfort. Confirmation. The dining room had been rearranged. My mother's china was on the table. The good silver was out. Diane had put a low arrangement of white pumpkins and eucalyptus in the center, just tall enough to make people lean sideways to see one another. At the head of the table, where my mother used to sit, Diane had placed a folded napkin and a small printed menu. At my place, there was a folder. Cream paper. Gold clip. My name on a sticky note. Robert saw me look at it. "Just some housekeeping," he said. Housekeeping. Another clean word dragged over a dirty floor. "We can eat first," Diane said quickly. "No pressure today." There was pressure everywhere. It was in the folder by my plate. It was in the sign by the driveway. It was in the way Diane's hand kept touching the back of my mother's chair, as if claiming furniture required fingerprints. It was in the clock over the sideboard, ticking toward the toast Robert had promised in his email. I set the tote by my feet. Not on the counter. Not in the pantry. Not anywhere Diane could touch it. Dinner began with noise. Forks. Serving spoons. Cousins asking safe questions. Someone complimented the turkey. Diane said she had used an old family method, and my father smiled before he took a drink of water. An old family method. I could see the recipe card in my mind. My mother's loops, her note in the margin. "More salt if Robert says it needs nothing." That almost made me laugh. I swallowed it with water. Robert stood before dessert. He tapped his glass once. Not loudly. He knew loudness made people nervous. He preferred control that looked like manners. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he said. "This house has carried a lot of history, and Diane has done a great deal to make it feel alive again." Diane lowered her eyes. "It was a practice lowering," Robert continued. "There comes a time when families have to stop letting old pain define them. Claire and I have talked about that." We had not. He looked at me. I looked back. "And after dinner," he said, "we will take a few minutes to handle some family matters, with Marjorie here to make sure everything is clear." Marjorie lifted her cup and did not drink. That was the first small gift of the day. She did not rescue me. She did not interrupt him. She simply let his words sit there with his name on them. When Robert sat down, Diane touched his wrist. A grateful wife touch. A stage touch. The room relaxed because people wanted to relax. That is something I learned early. Most families will choose a comfortable lie if the truth looks like it might ruin pie. I let them eat dessert. Then I stood and carried my plate to the kitchen. No one stopped me. That was the advantage of being useful at a family holiday. A woman can leave a room with dishes and nobody asks why. In the kitchen, the pantry door was half open. I saw the back of a wooden chair through the gap. My mother's chair. The same carved top. The same scratch along the left leg from the year my cousin had pushed it too hard into the wall. It had not been thrown away. It had been stored. Hidden. Not gone. I put my plate in the sink and touched the chair with 2 fingers. For a moment, the whole house narrowed to that piece of wood. My father had moved it away from the table when I was 10. He had not destroyed it. That was his mistake. Some men only know how to remove things from view. They think that is the same as winning. If you have ever found one small thing that proved you were not crazy, hold on to that feeling. And if this story is speaking to a place in you that still remembers being pushed out of a room, comment the word seat. Because when I walked back into that dining room, my father thought he was about to get my signature. I carried the chair with both hands. It was heavier than I remembered. Or I was carrying more than wood. The dining room went quieter, one person at a time. My aunt stopped talking mid-sentence. One of my cousins lowered his fork. Diane looked first at the chair, then at the tote by my place. Robert smiled. That was the part I noticed most. He still smiled, because he still thought he understood the scene. "Claire," he said lightly, "we are not rearranging furniture." "No," I said. "We are putting it back." I set the chair near the end of the table, not at the head. Not yet. Then I sat down and placed the tote on my lap. Robert's smile thinned. "Before this becomes theatrical, let's handle the paperwork." He slid the folder toward me. The gold clip flashed under the chandelier. My name on the sticky note looked small and temporary. I opened the folder. The title was exactly what the email had promised. Family Harmony Acknowledgement. Under it, in polished language, the document said Diane was the maternal head of the household. It said the lake house served as the marital home of Robert and Diane Mercer. It said I supported future planning that reflected that reality. It said I released any objection based on prior family arrangements. Prior family arrangements. That was what my mother had become on paper. A prior arrangement. I closed the folder. Robert leaned forward. This is not legal combat, Claire. It is a gesture. A gesture with signature lines. For peace. For title work before Monday. His eyes changed. Only a little. Enough. Diane set her napkin beside her plate. No one is trying to take anything from you. That was the wrong sentence. She knew it after she said it. Her hand went to her throat. Marjorie set her cup down. Robert kept his voice low. We are asking you to acknowledge the family as it is now. I looked at the sign visible through the front window, the one with Diane's script letters. I looked at the folder. I looked at the chair from the pantry. The trap had clean edges now. He wanted my voice at the table. He wanted my name on the paper. He wanted both before Monday. He wanted the woman he had put in my mother's chair to be written into the house before anyone could call it what it was. I did not accuse him. I did not explain the trap to the room. I reached into the tote and placed the recipe box on the table. The little brass latch clicked. Diane inhaled as if she had been handed flowers. Robert relaxed so quickly it was almost generous of him. He thought I had brought tribute. He thought I had finally carried my mother's box to Diane's table and laid it down like an apology. See? He said to the room. This is what healing looks like. Marjorie looked at the box. I kept my hand on the lid. Robert turned to me with the smile he used for photographs. Call Diane Mom at this table, Claire. Just once. No one reached for a fork. I opened the recipe box. The cards inside shifted softly against one another. I took out the plain envelope. I placed it beside the folder he had pushed toward me. Then I lifted my mother's old place card and set it in front of the chair I had carried back from the pantry. Claire's seat stays at my table. For a moment, nobody moved. The place card sat in front of the chair. My mother's handwriting was small, blue, and certain. It did not shout. It did not need to. Diane's hand slid off the back of my mother's chair. She wiped her palm against her sweater as if the wood had marked her. My cousin Mark lowered his fork until it touched his plate without a sound. Across the table, Aunt Linda pressed 2 fingers against her mouth and kept them there. My father stared at the card. Not at me. At the card. That was how I knew he understood the first part. He had spent 25 years telling himself my mother was gone from the room. Then one scrap of paper put her back at the table, and he did not know where to look. Claire, he said, this is not necessary. I did not answer that. Necessary was not his word to use. I opened the recipe box wider and took out the first card. It was not a recipe. It was one of my mother's notes, written on the same cardstock she used for pie crust and gravy. For Claire, if anyone tells her she does not belong. I placed it beside the folder. Then I took out the second card. For Claire, because my daughter should never have to ask where to sit. The room changed then, not loudly. A room can change by inches. Diane's chin lifted, then dropped. Someone at the far end pushed back from the table, just enough for the chair legs to scrape once. Marjorie Lane reached into her purse and removed her glasses. My father's fingers closed around his water glass. You have made your point, he said. No, I said. Mom made it. That was the only sharp thing I allowed myself. I took out the place card again and turned it so the table could see. The blue ink had faded at the edges, but the words were clear. My mother had not written guest. She had not written child from Robert's first marriage. She had not written problem to be managed after she was gone. She had written my name. Diane looked toward Marjorie. These are keepsakes, she said. They are very sweet, but they are keepsakes. Marjorie put on her glasses. My father's face tightened. Diane. It was the first honest sound he had made all day. Not love. Warning. Marjorie did not look at Diane. She looked at my father. Robert, she said. When did Helen ever name Diane as the mother of this house? The question was simple enough for every person at that table to understand. My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Marjorie waited. He looked down at the folder. He looked at Diane. He looked at the place card again. His thumb moved over the side of the water glass until the skin went pale. That is not the issue, he said. It is the issue you put in writing, Marjorie said. She tapped the folder with one finger. Not hard. Once. My father reached for the folder before he should have. That was the second mistake. Until then, some people might have pretended the document was harmless. The speed of his hand told the truth faster than any speech could. I rested my palm on the folder. He stopped. Claire, he said softly. Do not turn a private family healing into a legal performance. I looked at him. You invited the lawyer. Aunt Linda made a sound behind her fingers. It was not a laugh. It was what comes out when a person sees the trap from the wrong side for the first time. Marjorie slid the folder toward herself. May I? I lifted my hand. She opened it. The gold clip caught the light. She read only the first page. She did not need the rest. The title did enough damage before the sentences even began. Family Harmony Acknowledgement. She turned the page toward the table. This document identifies Diane as the maternal head of the household. It also describes this lake house as the marital home of Robert and Diane Mercer. Diane whispered, "That is just wording." Marjorie finally looked at her. Wording is what people use when they want the house to move without anyone noticing. That quieted her. My father stood up too fast. His chair struck the baseboard behind him. A small spoon fell from someone's saucer. He looked larger standing, but not stronger. Standing only proved he needed height. "This is absurd," he said. Helen wanted peace. I reached into the recipe box and took out the folded copy of my mother's letter. I did not wave it. I did not read it like a victory speech. I unfolded it and placed it below the place card. Marjorie put one hand beside it, not on top of it. "Robert," she said, "did Helen give you lifetime use of this house?" He swallowed. "Yes." "And did she give you permission to transfer your interest to Diane? Rent it as yours, rename it as yours, or require Claire to release her position?" His jaw moved once, twice. "No," he said. There it was. One syllable. 25 years of moving chairs, changing names, and calling me childish came down to one word he could not decorate. Diane turned toward him. "Robert?" He did not look at her. That was when the room understood the second part. Diane had not been seated at a table she earned. She had been seated in a chair my father had no right to give her. Marjorie closed the folder. The sound was small. It landed hard. "Then this is not a family gesture," she said. "It is proof that you tried to do what Helen barred." She lifted the folder by the gold clip and set it away from my plate. Then she took the pen Robert had placed beside it and put the pen in her purse. That was the first thing he lost in front of us. Not the house yet. The pen. The signature. The little instrument he had counted on me using. My father stared at her purse. It would have been funny in a meaner story. This was not that. His face had begun to change. The color under his eyes went gray. A pulse beat at the side of his neck. He looked at the recipe box like it had betrayed him, which was exactly how he looked at people who refused to stay small. "You cannot do this today," he said. "I am not doing it today," Marjorie said. "You did it when you put the paper on her plate." Mark, my cousin, pushed his chair back all the way then. He did not speak. He just stood and moved his water glass away from the folder, as if even sitting near it made him part of something dirty. Aunt Linda reached for the place card. She did not pick it up. She touched the corner with one finger. "Helen wrote every place card herself," she said. That one sentence warmed the room and broke it at the same time, because now it was not only my word, it was not only Marjorie's paper. It was a living person at the table saying she remembered my mother's hand. Diane's eyes filled then. I do not know whether it was grief, embarrassment, or the first clear sight of what she had accepted. Naming other people's feelings had cost me enough. My father looked at Aunt Linda. "Linda, stay out of this." She took her hand away from the card. "Robert, I was there." He had no answer for that either. Marjorie removed a second envelope from her purse. Plain white. Already sealed. Already addressed. "Robert," she said, "as trustee, I am filing this tomorrow morning. From this moment on, you cannot rent, transfer, rename, or treat the lake house as yours." He seized on the last word. "Cannot? Cannot," Marjorie said. "Your right to act as if the house is yours is done." That was the line. Not dramatic, not loud. Done. The room took it in one body at a time. Diane sat down as if her knees had been cut loose. Mark looked toward the sign outside the front window. Aunt Linda kept staring at my mother's place card. Someone in the kitchen turned off the running faucet that nobody remembered starting. My father looked at me then. Finally. Not over me. Not through me. At me. He looked at the woman holding the box he had called kitchen clutter. He looked at the daughter he had tried to turn into a guest. He looked at the chair he had once dragged away from the table and saw it standing there anyway. "Claire," he said, "don't do this in front of everyone." I kept my hand on the recipe box. "You chose the table," I said. He blinked like I had slapped him. I had not. I had only returned his own stage to him. Marjorie gathered the folder, the printed acknowledgement, and the sealed notice into one stack. She did not hurry. That mattered. Hurry would have made it look like drama. Her calm made it look like record. Then she looked at me. Do you want the originals back in the box? Yes. I placed my mother's cards inside one by one. The note for when the house got loud. The note for when someone told me I did not belong. The note that called me her daughter. Last, I picked up the place card. Before I put it away, I set it once more on the table. In front of the chair. In front of Robert. In front of Diane. Claire's seat stays at my table. No one asked me to move it. The first thing to come down was the sign. 3 days after Thanksgiving, a handyman Robert had hired for years unscrewed Robert and Diane Mercer from the post beside the driveway. He did it in the rain. Marjorie sent me one photo because I had asked for proof, not poetry. The script letters lay face up in the wet gravel. Diane's name had mud along the bottom curve. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I saved it in a folder with the other records and made soup for dinner. That was how the consequences began. Quietly. In pieces. The summer rental calendar was cancelled first, because Robert no longer had the right to rent out what he could not control. The listing photos came down. The dock repair contract had to be paused. Diane had ordered furniture for the primary suite. The storage company called her, not me. By the second week of December, the locks changed. Marjorie mailed me the new set in a padded envelope. 3 keys. One for the front door, one for the pantry. One for the old side entrance by the mudroom, where my mother used to bring in grocery bags and kick snow off her boots. I held the pantry key the longest. That was the door Diane had stood in front of when she called my mother's things a fresh start. That was the room where my father had hidden the chair. It was also the room where the china still sat, wrapped badly in paper Diane had never bothered to remove. The $1.9 million house did not vanish from Robert's life in one grand sweep. It left him by habits. He could not host Christmas there. He could not tell neighbors he would open the place up in July. He could not use the lake view in polite conversation the way some men use watches. He could not stand on the dock and talk about taxes like ownership was just a matter of speaking first. He had to ask before stepping inside. That was the part he hated most. Not the money. Not even the embarrassment. The asking. Diane called me before he did. Her number appeared on my phone on a Tuesday afternoon while I was standing in the grocery store, holding a bag of cranberries I did not need. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller without a dining room behind it. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she loved my father. She said she had only wanted a family. She said the word mother had been complicated for all of us. I listened once. Then I deleted it. There are apologies that ask for forgiveness. There are apologies that ask you to make the speaker feel clean. Diane's was the second kind. My father waited 6 days. When he finally called, he did not say hello. He said, "Diane is humiliated." Of course he did. Even after all of it, he led with her. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the recipe box on the shelf. "I heard you. That is all you have to say?" "For that sentence, yes." He breathed through his nose. I knew that sound. It had corrected me since childhood. "This has gone too far," he said. "No, it went too far when I was 10. Silence. Then, very quietly, he said, "I should not have made you eat in the garage." It was the first honest sentence he had given me about that night. I did not throw it away. I also did not let it buy the house back. "You should not have," I said. I was grieving. So was I. He had no fast answer for that. He had built a whole adult life on forgetting that children grieve too. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "That is because you keep trying to fix the part that cost you something." Another silence. This one was different. Less angry, more bare. I told him he could write to me if he wanted to say something true. I told him I would read it when I was ready. I told him he would not be coming to the lake house for Thanksgiving. Not that year. Not the next. Maybe not ever. I did not say it like punishment. I said it like weather. He asked whether I hated him. I thought about that. "No," I said. "I just stopped letting you decide where I sit." That ended the call. In January, I went back to the lake house alone. The air inside was stale. Diane had left behind 3 scented candles, 2 unopened throw blankets, and a framed print that said "Gather" in gold letters. I put the candles in a box. I folded the blankets. I took the print off the wall and set it in the mudroom for Robert to collect. I did not strip the house clean of her out of spite. I removed what pretended to have always belonged. There is a difference. In the pantry, I found my mother's chair where I had left it after Thanksgiving. Someone had pushed it against the wall again, but not far. I carried it back to the dining room. This time, no one watched me. No one argued. The chair scraped once across the floor, and the sound did not hurt me the way it used to. I put it at the side of the table. Not at the head. My mother did not need a throne. She had never wanted one. She had wanted room. I opened the recipe box on the dining table and took out the card I had written when I was 10. Cranberry relish, in crooked pencil. Orange zest still looked like 2 strangers standing too far apart. Behind it was my mother's clean version. I placed both cards side by side. Then I made the recipe. Badly, at first. I used too much orange. I dropped a spoon. I had to call Aunt Linda and ask whether my mother used fresh cranberries or the frozen bag when she was tired. Aunt Linda said, fresh if she had company, frozen if she had sense. That sounded right. In February, I invited Aunt Linda to the house for lunch. Not a holiday, not a ceremony. Just soup, bread, and coffee at the table. She brought a stack of old photos in a grocery bag. In one of them, my mother stood at the stove with me on a stool beside her. My father was in the background, half turned away, already looking at something outside the frame. Aunt Linda tapped the photo. Helen always made sure you were in the picture. I put that photo in the recipe box. Not because it was evidence, because it was mine. By the next Thanksgiving, I was 36, and the house felt different. Not healed. I do not trust that word when people use it like a broom. But different. The china was back in the cabinet. The old signpost by the driveway was empty. I left it that way. I invited 6 people. Aunt Linda came. Mark came with his wife and their 2 girls. Marjorie came for coffee after dinner and brought no paperwork. That was the first thing she said when she walked in. No files today. Good, I said. I only made 1 pie. She smiled at that. We did not put my mother's chair at the head. We put it at the side, where light from the lake touched the back in the afternoon. I placed the old place card in front of it for a moment before dinner. Then I put it back in the recipe box. Some things do not need to stay on display to keep their power. At the table, Mark's youngest daughter asked why there was an empty chair. I told her, because someone loved us well here. She accepted that. Children often understand the truth before adults try to improve it. That night, after everyone left, I washed the plates and dried the counter. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. Clean tired. The kind that comes after you stop carrying a chair someone else moved. I stood by the window and looked out at the lake. The dark made a mirror of the glass. For a second, I could see my reflection with the dining room behind me. The table was not full. It was not grand. It was simply mine to open or close. A family table is not proved by who sits at the head. It is proved by who never has to beg for a chair. That is what my mother left me. Not just a house. Not just a box. A measure. Real family is not the person who demands a title before they show you love. Real family is the person who saves your seat when you are late, when you are grieving, when you are too young to explain why a word hurts. That's my story. 26 years, 1 recipe box, 1 chair dragged away from a Thanksgiving table. 1 $1.9 million lake house. My father thought he could turn into a gift for someone else. 1 word I refused to trade. Mom. If someone ever made you feel like love had to be earned by calling the wrong person family, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not difficult because you remember. You are not cruel because you keep a boundary. And you do not have to become smaller so another person can look innocent. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their seat still matters. Comment seat if you have ever had to take your place back. And subscribe if you believe quiet truth can still move a whole table.